We're going to pick it up again. So we're lucky to have Seth again talking with us, but he's going to give us more information about the special education program overview. And what's lovely about the meeting this time is he has a lot more time than he had at the last meeting.
Yes, that's good.
So welcome back.
All right, thank you, Kristen. Thanks everybody for being here. Good to see everyone. So I'm going to do a overview of our programs and services here at SGUSD. I'm lucky to have several of our fantastic principals in the room too, who I'm going to call on to offer some insight into the programs that they have at their sites. As I go, feel free to stop me with questions. I might ask that we cut questions off though to move along. There is an interactive piece, so be ready for that. So I'm going to start with San Jose Unified's vision. So can anyone from last meeting remember what it is? I think someone who said the answer said, they told me I'm a traitor if I know this.
No. Totally wrong.
But can anyone tell me what the district's vision is?
The thinkers, leaders, and doers of tomorrow.
Close. TL, thinkers, leaders,
Innovators.
creators.
Creators.
Close. I think innovators, creators, it's synonymous. Yeah, so our vision is to prepare today's students to be the thinkers, leaders, and creators of tomorrow. And so that includes, obviously, our students with special needs. And so the way that we do that is to offer services and programs tailored to meet the unique needs of our students who have IEPs. So can I ask for a volunteer to read this excerpt from IDEA? Sue, thank you.
Free and appropriate public education is to ensure that all children with disabilities have available to them a free, appropriate public education that emphasizes special education and related services designed to meet their unique needs and prepare them for further education, employment, and independent living.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. So this is what the law charges us as a school district to do. And I wanted to start with this because I think before we delve into the specifics of the programs and services, it's important to think about what's the foundation for these programs and services? Like what is driving them? What is the process to get to where we identify the needs of a student and provide services and a program to help them get to meet those goals. And so the foundation of that is the free and appropriate public education as outlined in IDEA. Which is right here. We want to prepare students for further education, employment, and independent living. Similar to being the thinkers, leaders, and creators of tomorrow, I think it goes really well hand in hand with our own district's vision. So, to just give a little bit of a foundation in terms of how do we arrive at the services and a program that a student is placed in our district. And so this is relatively simplified, but I think it's a good way to think about it in terms of understanding, like how do we know which program to put a student in? What actually drives that? Because it's not just the eligibility, it's not just the assessment results. There's a lot of different factors that go into determining what are the services that a student it needs to meet their goals. And so the important points here are highlighted in red. So the present levels, including the parent input, so that includes the parent input, the teacher's input, the formalized assessments that are done by the special education teacher, by the school psychologist, by the speech language pathologist, by any other provider where there might be a suspected area of concern, leads to a determination of if the student is eligible for special education services. So that's the first thing we decide, is the student even eligible for services? The present levels then also inform if the student is eligible for the IEP team to define all the areas of need for the student. So do they have an area of need in reading? Do they have it in fine motor skills, for example? Those areas of need then drive the goals that we develop to address that the IEP team develops to address every area of need. And then we align services for the students to meet those goals. So it's sort of the progression that I think a lot of you are probably very familiar with. I just think I like how this lays it out. To think about how do we get to the services and a program that the student is placed in. Questions? Captive audience, all right. So I start with that because there's a process that we go through in order to figure out what is the most appropriate placement for a student. And it's mainly driven by the services that the student receives which are driven by the goals that we've developed for them, which are driven by the areas of need that we've identified. And so we're going to start by first just talking about those related services that are provided to a student, because those really, more than anything, determine which program the student ends up in. It's not the medical diagnosis that they have, or even their primary disability. The primary disability could be a number of things, but they may be in a totally different program from a student with the same primary disability, because the needs are different, the goals are different, the services that we've put around those goals are different. So, can someone, another volunteer, just read the top, another excerpt from IDEA? Thank you.
Related services means transportation and such developmental, corrective, and other supportive services as are required to assist a child with a disability to benefit from special education.
Excellent. So, we've gone through this process, and we've aligned services, transportation, all the other things, to help a student meet those goals. And so, what I like to think about it is the baseline is the students in the general education setting all of the entire day. But through the assessment process, through the IEP process, we found that the student needs additional services to meet goals that we've identified for them based on their areas of need. Those services can range from a full day of specialized academic instruction, so the whole school day they're receiving specialized academic instruction from a special education teacher, to they might just need some speech and language services to meet their needs for a particular amount of time, for a particular duration each week. They may need occupational therapy services, adaptive physical education services, and as I put there, many, many more. So the related services really make up how we are going to meet those students' unique needs. And it determines, in large part, what program we're going to place them in. Because, for example, if you have specialized academic instruction for less than half the day, you're in a general education setting for most of the time, and your services that you need can be met through a resource teacher on site. Whereas if you are receiving specialized academic instruction for 75 to 80% of the day, you might need to be in a program that has a teacher that's qualified to do that. All right, no questions so far.
Yes.
All right, yeah.
Can you tell us just what some of those many, many more are?
Sure. So we've got education-related mental health services there, deaf, hard of hearing services. You might have orientation and mobility for visually impaired students. Geez, you're putting me on the spot here. These are the big ones. Trying to think what else. Assistive technology, yes. I have education-related mental health services, which is like counseling and guidance. Different behavioral services, potentially. Just thinking of the list in our IT system.
And then
Yeah,
you're also getting whatever the physical therapy services.
physical therapy services, yep.
Yeah.
Occupational therapy, which, yeah, that's up there. Yep. Yeah, so really, like anything that, I mean, I don't mean anything, but like for the most part, if it's related to the student's ability to access the curriculum is an area of need, there's, we have related services that we can put around that. Yeah.
So I'm wondering if anyone else is wondering, you haven't brought up least restrictive environment at all throughout this. Is it coming up?
Yeah, it is.
Because you did mention general population or general education.
Yeah.
The other thing is, I guess this is interpreted differently because I interpret IDEA and the IEP as something that's portable.
Mhm.
So it shouldn't be dependent on which program. It should be a portable document that
Yeah.
a child could take to any school.
Yeah,
And in the least restrictive environment, have their services and support be brought to them.
yeah,
So I'm glad you're agreeing because I hope that at some point we're gonna say that this is how we're doing it and we're going towards in that direction to be more in line with IDEA.
yeah, I think so. So it's a good point. Let me go here, which is where I was gonna go next. My slides are a little out of order. The last one should be after this. But I think to answer your question, yes, this is where least restrictive environment comes in. And so I've created here a relatively simplified pyramid, which is similar to something I showed last time as well, that represents the continuum of services that we have. And while the pyramid is banded by color, this is by no means discrete levels that a student moves through or is placed within. This is truly a continuum of services to meet an individual student's unique needs. And so the desire and the hope for all of our students is that they can remain in the general education setting with the appropriate supports and services to allow them to access the curriculum and allow us to meet their individual needs. And so at the top here I have general education, and then it comes down to, depending on the services that the student needs, is different supports within the class that they may receive as part of their day, either pushing into a general education environment or potentially, as we go down here, to be pulled out. For example, you would get your educationally related mental health services in an individual setting for the most part. So from here down to here, these are all services that are delivered either in or in small pull-out sessions within the general education environment. So Tiffany brought up a great point, which is the considerations of least restrictive environment. So under the law, we are required, and we strive to, for the benefit of the student, to provide the services that meets their unique needs in the least restrictive environment as possible. So that's a pretty meaty topic that maybe we could have another presentation around, but it is very key to determining what the level of services are that we provide to the student and where the student is placed in terms of the program.
I'm trying to understand, why would we move from support in class anywhere below that? And how do you determine, is it based on availability of services, or what is that based on?
It's a case-by-case basis, a decision made by the IEP team based on that student's needs and where is the most appropriate place for them to be served. Yeah. And so, I mean, the elephant in the room is could all students, the full inclusion model. And so there's always, us striving to get to different places with where we are as a school district. But to answer your question most plainly, it's an IEP team decision in terms of the placement based again on the present levels, which have driven the areas of need, which have driven the goals, which then drive the services that we align to help the student meet those goals. There's a few other considerations to take into that, or I guess one prime other consideration too, which is the state in California, we have two different types of credentials that teachers can have. Actually a few more, but for the most part, two different types. And some students, depending on the disability that they've been categorized in through their eligibility, require a teacher with a specific credential that may not exist at every school site.
Example, please.
Yeah, so an example, students who have a primary disability, an intellectual disability, there's a credential called the moderate severe credential that their case manager has to have that credential. And there's a certificate that a case manager has to have to work with students whose primary disability is autism that we strive in our district to have every single teacher have, but in some districts, not all of the case managers or teachers have that credential or that certificate.
Can you explain a little bit how this correlates to the amount of time that each child has in their IEP for special education services? Like for my son, it's 17% of the time he's in special education. So would that be including pull-out services and support in class?
So so she asked about the percentage that's calculated in an IEP of the percentage of time the student is outside the general education environment. So the outside time would count for anything that happens outside of the general education class. So the push and support would count as in the general education environment as long as the student's remaining within that classroom. Yeah, but any, the pull-out services, for speech and language, that would be considered outside of the general education setting.
But it's still correlated in the same amount of number, in the same time. Push, right now, there's not anybody to push in because there's not enough IEAs for support inside a class. So essentially he's losing out on time right now because there's not enough support, even though it says he's having 17% of the time receiving special education services.
Okay. I don't know the specifics of your son.
But then, I don't mean to say any specifics. So that 17% of the time can be support in class, pull-out services, and and special education class, all that could be within the special education services, within the IEP?
Yes.
Okay, so they could just do whatever to try to make it work for that 17% of the time, or whatever time allotment.
The,
I think a percent as low as 17% would not fall into a special education class, because that would be at least one full
Well, it'd
period.
be an RSP class.
in the
Right.
percent, the
Okay.
percent doesn't come first, it's the minutes of services that come first.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly what
Yeah.
term it is, but I think it calculated
Yeah.
out to be the 17%.
So there would be, if I'm understanding your question, there would be no, we as a school district can't change which services are being offered to meet the 17%.
Okay,
We're governed by the service minutes for each type of service. So for example, 50 minutes of speech and language services, an hour of educational related mental health services, that drives the percentage.
Okay.
So Seth, in that line, would an IA in the classroom serving several students count as part of the minutes?
As part of the push-in.
So to piggyback off of that, isn't there a piece missing where we need to talk about proportionality? So if I'm in the general education classroom and we push in 8 to 10 students, you've thrown the proportionality of that general ed class so out of whack that it's no longer gen ed. It's now a different dynamic, and I think that's what's missing, right? So proportionality, we should be at 10 to 20% to be able to count that as gen ed time. Once that percentage is skewed, it's no longer a gen ed, that's switching over
Sure.
the type and nature of the class because of the needs of those students.
I hadn't planned on like diving into the minutia of the master schedule, but there are APIs at all of our schools, assistant principals of instruction, that are very careful when they're doing the master schedule to take that into account. There's some other things too at high school in terms of the number of teachers that an RSP case manager can support, and so there's like a lot of scheduling implications that I haven't gotten into in this presentation, but yes, certainly, like that is something we have to be cognizant of, is the number of students who are receiving the same type of service in a particular setting. Yeah,
But
for sure.
then the numbers being askew occurs like in the Hoover program where the RSP teacher has a clump of students they're following around. I thought it was more than 5. So when that was my understanding, but maybe that program has changed, maybe we're learning something different today. But they had a program where they were pushing in with the students into all their classes, but it was a group that they were following around, because I remember they were showing that to me with my son's needs.
Pioneer
Okay.
does that too, where it's kind of like the students are tracked into certain classes so that they can
Together.
receive the certain supports that the IAs could give in that certain class, or the RSP teachers could follow. So-
Yeah, in terms of, I
Yeah.
think grouping would be better in terms of making the schedule like manageable for a case manager to provide all the services. Yeah, but again, I think it's like, there's a lot of details that go into that, creating that master schedule at the secondary sites. Yeah,
And thank you for answering my questions, because mine was like, yeah, does the pull-out count as that, or
Yeah.
does it have to be
Yeah.
inside the RSP classroom? So thank
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
for my obscure question.
So, I wanted to ask, but maybe this is kind of moving into my question. What is considered appropriate when you talk about an appropriate
Yeah.
education? And it sounds like the percentages involved in general education and support play a role into that definition, I'm guessing. Does that sound right?
yeah, I mean, appropriate is defined by the IEP team based on the levels, the areas of need that the student has, the service minutes that are aligned to that, which govern like what's appropriate. That is, I mean, the free and appropriate public education, that is what's appropriate. And so there is no like black and white answer, I think, to your question. It's really the IEP team's decision. Yeah.
It's the IEP team that get together and really try to evaluate the student and they come back together with the parents and determine what services are what services and what they can provide on the group site.
Yep.
Plus, you guys I've been through it myself, I know the process.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, you hit the nail on the head. And when I say IEP team too, I'm including parents are part of that team. So it's the team decision in terms of the appropriateness. So you as a parent may disagree, and then there's discussion. Maybe one provider disagrees, there's discussion, until the team reaches what they feel is appropriate.
So, and based on the definition that you had up there, we're aiming for, what was it, employment, or can you put that definition?
Yeah, just, I mean, it's what IDEA defines, yeah, further education, employment, and independent
Employment
living.
and independent
Yeah.
living, so as long as you're kind of, that's the goal though, right?
Yeah,
So.
yeah, certainly, yeah. And as students get older too, that probably not the time for this presentation, but there's a transition plan that's developed for them that further outlines the post-secondary goals that they have as well. Yeah. Other questions? Okay, great. So we're gonna do a little related services activity where we give you guys a chance to look at some goals that a student has and determine what would be the related service that might be associated with that goal that a student would get. So I put on all the tables face down, 2 pieces of paper. So we're gonna take just 5 minutes. So with your group, if you can read the 2 goals, determine based on this bank which is the appropriate related service for that goal, and then I'm going to ask each table to just share out one of the 2, just to give you an idea of what it might look like when you're an IEP team, looking at a student's goal and determining the related service.
So I'm sorry, because I'm a parent and
Yeah.
not a speech and language
Yeah.
pathologist, could you explain what reducing emissions in connected speech is? Because that is mumbo jumbo in parent land.
Yeah. Well, let's table that.
Okay.
Yeah, but
But
maybe we
it's
can
in
have
the
Diana.
goal if I don't understand it.
I did not select these for 100%
So
parent
the,
friendliness.
so
I tried a
the
little
task
bit.
is to
but-
pick the related service, not pick the goal one.
Okay.
So
Well,
related
but
service is gonna be
speech. But the
Yeah, that would be sure. Yeah.
Okay.
I think the related services.
Are we to determine how long?
No, just the related service. So just 5 minutes with your group. It should. I think it'll take less than that.
It was nothing to do with you being I tried knowing the Kool-Aid, yes, I drank the Kool-Aid knowing that, so nothing has to do with all of me.
I'm sorry to make you something, but I've been through that process.
No, I appreciate it.
I've been through that process so many times I can do it like the back of my hand.
I'm sure.
no doubt.
I'm sure. Yeah. No, I appreciate your input. You hit the nail on the
No, I'm
head.
just saying.
Appropriate is.
Yeah,
Every opportunity.
No, the speech and language pathologist tends to.
that's why if they can help you explain
First,
some of that
your
stuff,
mission,
it's
read the
Yeah.
goal.
Yeah.
Of which one?
so
The one that has
please use
emissions.
it
Okay.
while I have time.
Yeah.
You have a different goal.
Yeah, let me think about that.
No, what's the goal that has emissions?
Oh, reducing omissions in connected.
Oh, omission. So if a student goes cat, so cat will say cat. So you're gonna reduce omitting sounds, which is.
Kind of stuff I can almost give it.
Yeah.
That technology,
Yeah.
the whole institute in the computer.
What did you say?
I think so. I'm sure.
It
Yeah.
looks amazing and helpful in helping a
child articulate
And,
those concepts,
and you know
very
what,
specific.
public speaking
But then
in
that's
my
too
government
specialized for me.
as well.
It's not, I can do the same thing without it. I mean, it's fun, but I can do the same thing without it.
With the tongue depressor.
Yeah, and there's no such thing as strengthening the tongue. I mean, it's a muscle, but you wouldn't put a weight on it and go.
I think that Rockstar guy does that, right? Tongue out tempo.
Yes. Are you talking about the kiss
What's she saying?
No, that's.
So just one more minute, please.
No, because you have to drop down box and where and in the classroom. I mean, that's where you want it. That's the beginning.
Not really mentioned to that the parents have to sign and we give a presentation on IEP. The parents have to sign the IEP, otherwise it's not a valid agreement.
Yep, absolutely. That's a good point.
And like, and there's a lot of people don't know that.
Yeah, you're ready to go to.
The next time you give a presentation, they must like it, otherwise they are not entitled to
I will let you know. All right, let's bring it back together. So I'm going to just ask each table to pick the one that they feel the most strongly about or really like, and just read the goal. Just read the goal and the related service that your team decided to be appropriate to help the student meet that particular goal. So I'm going to start up here with you guys.
Which one do you want to choose?
If you can just read the goal and then what was the related service you chose.
By 5/16/2020 in PE class, will participate with his or her peers in at least 3 lead-up games and or group skills activities with fewer than 3 prompts for 4 out of 5 trials as measured by teacher-recorded data.
And it sounded to us like the social pragmatics needed to be worked on, because there's a lot of social skills that you would need to have to do to achieve this goal.
Yeah, and which related service would that fall under?
Speech and language pathologists usually get it, but sometimes there are campuses with programs that we don't know the student.
Sure,
But if
sure.
there's an art program option, they would have a social pragmatics class.
Yeah, great, awesome. All right, back here.
She's ready.
Okay, by 5/17/2020, we'll be able to demonstrate self-advocacy skills by asking for help, accommodations, or modifications on his assignments with no more than 2 verbal prompts on 4 out of 5 trials, as measured by staff or counselor's observations. Well, since counselor observation is right there, I'm assuming it would be counselor, could be added to the speech and language goal. And then, you know, if you have a social cog type development class, that could also be a service.
Definitely.
Or if there's like autism, it could be ABA.
Okay,
Exactly.
yeah. So there's a lot that goes into, right? Two students could have very similar goals, and maybe it's a different related service based on their individual needs.
Or what's available at the school site.
Potentially, I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Yeah. How about this group here?
I heard you kind of insinuate that ABA is autism specific. And ABA works with all kinds of different things.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah, maybe a longer discussion for another time. Yeah.
Annual goal, by 4:20, we'll be able to demonstrate bouncing a ball by dropping the ball and catching it with 60% accuracy in 5 trials. That may be adaptive PE.
Yeah. How about you guys in that?
We have a goal saying to demonstrate improved postural control, provide stable basic support needed to facilitate better hand use for manipulation of classroom materials. Student will maintain body weight on alternate arms while prone on scooter board to propel board 15 feet with extended legs off floor, 80% accuracy. Thanking occupational therapist, possibly physical therapist.
Yeah, occupational and physical therapy, yeah, definitely.
Seth, I'm sorry, could this tables also have been PT?
Yeah, I think so. It could have been. I don't remember specifically the goal, but yeah, the dropping the ball one. Yeah, sure.
Given a scanning and screen reading software, X will transfer his written documents into audio format with 80% accuracy on 4 out of 5 trials as measured by TBI records. So we were thinking this would be assistive technology.
Yeah. Last but not least.
What's TVI? Just curious.
Teacher visually impaired, right?
Okay.
So by 3/21/20, when given access to a text reader program, spell check, or word prediction software with text-to-speech features, they will edit their written work for appropriate spacing, spelling, and capitalization in 2 out of 3 opportunities. So we went with assistive technology. But now I'm looking at it and it could be OT. So either one.
Great. Yeah, and so thank you. I know it's a little out of context, so you can see that there's like I said, depending on the student, there may be particular related services, but you can see there's a wide range of goals that a student might have, a wide range of the areas of need that they might have, so a wide range of services that might be offered in conjunction with those students, that student's particular needs. So, I was going to talk a little bit about this too, because I want to get back to the least restrictive environment and the portability as well. So, as we discussed, I wasn't going to go too deeply into least restrictive environment, but it is extremely important in this case in the sense that we want to educate students in the least restrictive environment as possible. So that's the most time with general education peers as possible. And so again, it's an individual case-by-case basis in terms of what's appropriate that the team decides with the parents' consent. Got a good note up here about parental consent being extremely important in this. With the parents' consent, that the services are delivered in. Yeah. And the other thing too is, you talked a little bit about IEP portability, and so that is always the goal, that we can offer the extent of services as possible that's appropriate for a student at every school site. And I think we're able to, we'll see, for the majority of the services that we have, but we do have some specific programs here in the district that we think have built-in supports that are meeting individual students' unique needs. But maybe eventually we can strive to get to that point where it is fully portable.
With least restrictive environments, because I've had the experience of going through the NPS process, there's a feeling of disconnect from the district. So do you have one person kind of managing that and connecting regularly with those parents?
We do. We have a full-time program specialist who only works with students in non-public schools.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and I think we recognize that as well and carved out time so that person can be meeting with the parents, developing relationships with them, making sure that we're at all the IEPs that are held, obviously, getting input from everybody, determining, hey, parent, I think the student's ready to come back to a comprehensive school site or whatever the case may be.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So it's more than just a liaison between the NPS and the district?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'd say a lot less of their time is with the NPS than it is with the families directly. Yeah. Our person who has the most contact with the NPS is just the person that handles the billing side of things. Yeah.
Can we know who this person is? So,
Our program specialist?
yeah, which program
Yeah,
specialist is?
it's Carrie Lewis.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions about this? So sort of talked about the range of these services. I'm going to sort of switch gears and go into, at San Jose Unified, the specific programs that we have here. Talk a little bit about each of those and the locations of them. So there's a lot of text on these slides. So I'll go through and explain the acronyms and the text as we go, but after the first one you should probably get good level of understanding of them. So before we go into the specifics of these programs, you'll see that most of this on here has to do with the specialized academic instruction, so who the core teacher is of the student. For the related services that we provide, speech language, pathology, all the ones that you listed here, we provide those at every school site. So most of the folks that provide them are either itinerant or we can expand and contract the resources that we have on site to meet the needs of the students. That becomes more difficult with a teacher, for example. It's more difficult to flex a teacher across 3 sites than it is to flex an occupational therapist across 3 sites, just given the nature of their duties on a day-to-day basis. So I'll start with all of the related services that we talked about outside of the specialized academic instruction are available across all of our sites. I can't think of any exceptions to that, but assistive technology, adaptive PE, occupational therapy, across the board available at all of our school sites.
Continuation schools, like Broadway?
Yeah, continuation schools as well. Yep, for sure. Education-related mental health services, really anything that you can think of available across all sites. We do, though, in terms of meeting students' individual needs, have programs that predominantly revolve around, like I said, the specialized academic instruction that the student is receiving, and or some of the other ancillary needs that come with that. So I'm gonna go through some of them I've grouped by grade level specific, and some by program specific, and hopefully you'll see that it makes sense just to consolidate the information. So I wanted to start with our preschool programs. So for our students that are aged 3 to 5, we have a preschool assessment center that's housed here at the district office, that if the student hasn't yet been assessed, which in the 3 through 5 range, we don't get a ton of students coming from other districts that have already been assessed. Most of them are new to the process for us. So our team assesses them here and determines if they're eligible, and then goes through that whole gamut that we talked about, what their present levels are, what their areas of needs are, what their goals are. And then we have a range of SDC preschool programs that are set up to meet those students' needs. And so I've included over here, you'll see this chart on the corner of each of them. For each of those categories, what the student to staff ratio is, excluding the teacher. So that's just the number of non-teacher adults that are in the room.
Seth?
Yeah.
So does that include one-on-one aides?
It does not. I was going to get to that. I will say that these numbers are our standard and vary depending on if a student in the class has a one-to-one aide, for example, or with some of our programs, especially in the pre-K through 5, if we have a student who has toileting needs, there's typically an extra aide assigned to that class to assist with the toileting needs of that student. So there's a little bit of flexibility, but this is sort of like the baseline staffing that's allocated to the class.
So those are your, on the far right, those are your IAs.
Yep, IAs, or in some cases, for example, in the SDC preschool autism class, behavioral supports that are specific to working with students with autism. So an outside company that has specific.
So we're not using IA specialized for those positions.
Correct, for the preschool, correct. Yes. So any non-teaching adult that's embedded in the classroom is included there. And so I'm just going to explain these abbreviations really quickly because they're going to come up and I just want to make sure we're all on the same page about them. So the AUT is for autism, so programs designed for students with autism. NC is non-categorical, and that is students who require a little more support than a resource teacher could provide and are thus in special education more than 50% of their time. Most of the students' primary disabilities would be a specific learning disability, but it can really vary depending on what's appropriate for that student. SDC moderate severe is for students who have moderately severely impacted by their disability, so it can range from primary disability of intellectual disability to other things, depending again on case-by-case basis, the individual needs of the student. And then at the preschool setting, we have our inclusion program at Almaden Elementary that we are hoping to expand greatly in the coming years. We're working on a grant right now to lay out our plan for the next 4 to 5 years for our early education. The thing about preschool that's interesting is we operate special education preschool programs. There's also our curriculum and instruction department operates state preschool programs that are funded entirely separately, that have a different set of standards than we do. So there's sort of these two competing sets of preschool programs that we're really trying to, with this grant, integrate more. But for the majority of these sites, there are also state preschools co-located there where mainstreaming can happen back and forth between those classes. And we strive to do that to the extent that it is required for the student to be successful. Yeah.
So my memory with the inclusion program at Almaden was we were piloting it there. How is, where I know we're only it's still in its infancy,
Yeah.
but is this district looking at then having the inclusion programs at other school sites?
I think we are, yes, that is the plan, that is the plan. I say I think because there's a lot of complex factors that come into play with our teachers association that we have to work with in collaboration to ensure that we have the appropriate supports for transitioning to that model. But this grant is certainly our goal we're writing into is to expand the inclusive opportunities for our students in the preschool setting.
Good.
Yeah.
I'm just curious how, like a parent with a 3-year-old who is struggling would access this information, how they would even know that it's available to them. I'm just, from my own experience, and it's been a few years, I remember getting a diagnosis for my 3-year-old at the time, and the medical community was like, you need to go to the school district.
Yeah.
I did, which wasn't San Jose Unified, and they just completely shut me down, like denied anything was going on, and I just didn't know any better, like who to talk to, what to ask for.
Yeah.
So how do parents, if they're a first-time parent with a 3-year-old,
Yeah.
know who to contact,
Yeah.
to even know that this is available to them?
Yeah, there's sort of maybe 3 answers to that question. I think the first is a lot of our students are being served by the San Andreas Regional Center in the 0 through 3 years. And we have a process with them where they notify us, hey, I got a student coming up, 2 years old, 6 months, so a lot of times later than that, but we need to hold an IEP and transition them from us to you. So a lot of parents get information that way. I think that's, I haven't looked at the numbers for this year, but that's usually over 50% of our age 3 through 5 students come through that pathway. The second is our website, and when we get a lot of 3 through 5-year-olds writing into our main info at special ed, they can type it in on the website, not special ed specific. We connect them with our program specialist who oversees our preschool assessment center, and they walk them through the process, send them a packet that sort of outlines, this is what the situation is now, these are the next steps. You have to come in and enroll if you haven't yet, so that's something that a lot of parents have to come in and do, and then we can start the assessment. And then with the Self is Help, we advertise our services per the requirements of Child Find and the laws, and our website has information about preschool assessment as well. So that's really the ways in which a parent would get information. Yeah.
I had similar issues at Kaiser, and they kept saying your district will do it, and I know they won't. So for the particular thing I was asking for, and so I just had to be really blunt and say they will not do that. I want this. So it's really hard because if you don't know, to kind of be pushy, then very frequently the doctors won't give you what you need.
Yeah, the medical part does get a little, we have some medical providers that refer things to us where we're like, this isn't what a school district does, you need to, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, sure.
So back in the dark ages when I was looking at Child Find, there are forms for doctors to fill out and refer to districts, but they need to come from the district. So are we ever looking at having that kind of outreach of Child Find? Because currently it's only published, the statement of Child Find in the newspapers, and then this year they did the parent magazine as well, which I was glad to see they added. But it seems that if we're having a mishandling of that information coming from doctors, that then we need to formulate an agreement with Kaiser and other services and, pediatric services to say, this is what we can do. If you want to refer, if you have a patient to refer, here's the form, here's the fax number, or soft copy, here's the email. I mean, have we ever considered as a district having that kind of contact with the medical community? Because certainly they are part of Child Find as our parents and grandparents and.
I'm struggling between that's a great idea and oh my gosh, that sounds overwhelming. So I think somewhere in there, like the bigger organizations, it wouldn't hurt for us to have that conversation. Because I know through my own workings with my own child that Kaiser gave us incredibly inaccurate information about what can or can't be done. And so just the fact that they were saying that tells me how badly they're misinforming parents.
How about having those forms available online? A link to the form so that when the parent calls in, instead of just saying, oh, the school district doesn't do that, say, the doctor needs to do that and you can find the form here.
What forms are you referring to? I'm
The
sorry.
one that you've made up.
No, there are actually templates for this out there for the medical field to have. I shared a few with my son's psychiatrist because he has on his intake form, does your child have an IEP? And sometimes he gets parents saying, what's an IEP? And now he is the first person to tell them about special education. And that a child with severe depression or anxiety actually can have access to resources through the school site. So, but there's templates of, describe the medical issue. Did the parents say they have an IEP, or is this an initial request for an assessment? And the doctor can fill out that information. But it's best if it's set up, Syracuse, New York found that it was best to send it with a cover letter to the medical providers that makes it quite clear that these are the parameters and it needs to be a condition that would impact their access to education, because that is where you have to start with this process, right? So by spelling it out so that they're not presuming that every disability they should be doing it, so they know that there is a framework that you have to go by. And that's what they provided to the medical profession, then they have that relationship,
Got
So
it.
they started with the medical group that they were working with as a district and then grew out of that.
Got it. Yeah, it could be something, trying to find Leah's face, because there are a lot of districts in the area, it might make sense to collaborate.
I think our Part C partners, County Office of Education and Regional Center, with our partnership with them, they do reach out to the medical field in terms, especially focusing on early intervention. So we do have some reach with the hospital system or the medical system in terms of having some sharing information or sharing resources with the medical field. I think we have gone a long way in terms of the medical model versus the educational model. We still struggle with that because they are systems that may overlap or may not overlap.
Right.
So because we, in the educational system, we have our own definitions of disability and the needs and the need for services for these students as compared to the medical field. They have their DSM system for identifying. So we're trying to find, we do have partnerships. We do collaborate with or share presentations with other agencies through our other partners, not just through the CELPA, but through our and other educational partners.
Yeah.
So my concern around that is, what about the kids who aren't connected at SARC?
Yeah.
Where do their doctors, they call the district, and the district says that's not our job, that's the doctor's job.
We don't really do that unless, I can't even actually remember a situation where it was like, we need to push this parent back to their medical provider because what they're coming to for us isn't part of our realm.
But we've heard of 2 people here that just
Yeah.
said that tonight.
Yeah. But I think you were talking about the medical provider was saying go to the district, and that's where the education.
No, we're the district going to the medical.
Yeah. In that case, the person who coordinates our preschool assessment center, I think would just walk them through hey, here's the situation behind like this is the educational model, this is what services look like here. I think your question is much more in the X realm of the medical field. Yeah, yeah.
So we would funnel them to the assessment center on their initial call. and
Yeah,
say,
yeah,
"Contact
yeah,
us."
for sure, yeah, absolutely.
And then are we allowing parents to hear about the services we provide before they're enrolled? Say a family's out of town and they know they're gonna have to move to this area somewhere.
Yeah, if they call, we just had this person who's moving in from out of state, and one of our program specialists for that, it was an elementary student, just talked them through like, hey, hard to say without your exact IEP, but let me just broadly describe like how things work here. Yeah, and I know we had some twins over the summer who came in that we had the same situation with.
Awesome.
Yeah, so for the most
Seth,
part.
can I just add to that, because even at the SELPA, I do get those questions, and I have to give general answers.
Yeah.
Oh,
Because
absolutely.
the parents, I even have parents call me and say, which is the best district? And there's no answer to that.
No, they're right.
Right, and or
But
they
they
would,
can call each district and have the conversations with them.
they can have general conversations with
Right.
them. I have parents say, can I schedule observations for each of the school sites? So I would say you have to talk to the district, and the general answer to that is no, because we haven't even seen your child. We cannot start, going into these
Yeah.
classrooms one by one. So, the district will have to make sure it manages that process, because we want to make sure that, one, we have to get to know that student before we say, these are if it's a general question about what are the range of services, we can talk range of services, but.
But that's improvement that's happened since I entered the district, when I was told, we won't talk to you until your child's enrolled. And he wasn't coming back into the state for vacation until the day before school starts.
Yeah,
So there's a lot of improvement, and I appreciate that.
yeah.
I think there was a question.
I was just gonna say, we've got that kind of question before, where we've been offered a school and they have these services, and we would say, can we go and observe it before we start it? And they would say, no, we can't allow that. As a parent, you kind of want to just observe and see how things are, and if you feel like it's a good fit, that kind of thing, instead of just jumping right in it. And
Yep.
we've had issues where we put our daughter in something and it was totally wrong.
Mhm.
And we would have known that if we didn't see it. So I wonder, what is the policy now?
Yeah, I mean,
On observations.
sorry.
Policy lady.
Thought I cut somebody else. It's a fine line to walk, right? Because there is the real constraint of the caseloads that our collective bargaining agreement with our teachers union places on the number of students that we can have in a class. And so there are some classes, like I can show it to you, but there isn't a room for your student in here. As well as these programs are analogous, they offer the same level of services. If we have, it's a balancing act is the best that I can say, and we try to on a case-by-case basis really work with the parent to figure out what's going to be best for them. Yeah.
And there's also a lot of, turnarounds where the teachers leave at the end of the semester, so you never know if they're gonna return that same time. So I understand that part.
That was a wonderfully honest answer, by the way. Just to actually say, sometimes this might be the better program, but it's
But we're
full
full,
and we
it's
have caseloads, and this other would still provide faith and give you everything that the IEP required. Like, it may be better, but this is still what we can do. It was just a nice, honest answer.
Refreshing.
Thank you.
I hesitate on the word better,
Well-
but yes, I can understand, but we take a lot of factors into consideration too. It's like we want to keep students at their home school if possible, as close as possible. There's transportation considerations. We don't want a student riding a bus for 90 minutes, each day, even if you like the way that classroom looked more than the other classroom. So there's just a lot of factors. Do you have a sibling that goes to that school? A lot of things to try to balance. And so, the best answer I can say is we really try to do case-by-case basis to work with the parents and families. And that's what our program specialists do a lot of the day.
Those kind of explanations that feel better to us than, no, I can't show you that program.
Sure,
You know.
sure.
Very refreshing,
Yes.
very refreshing to hear. Thank you.
Sure. I'm gonna keep moving, just real quick. So I wanna highlight, this should have been on the other slide. But yes, so we offer, like I said, all of the related services at all of our schools, K through 12. The Resource Specialist Program, which is available at all school sites, has 20, case manager has 28 students on their caseload. And there's one aide, and then the teacher, obviously, like I said, this is exclusive of teachers. There's a couple of very unique programs that we have in our district that are at particular school sites. And so one that I want to highlight is our Autism Resource Program, which we have at Willow Glen Elementary, Willow Glen Middle, and Pioneer High School, where there's 15 students to 1.5 IAs plus the teacher. And we have the principal of Willow Glen Elementary with us too, so I just thought I'd ask her to share sort of, it's new to her school site this year, but just like what does a day for students in the Autism Resource Program look like?
I'm Kelly Knapp, I'm the principal at Willow Glen Elementary. Like Seth said, the art program is new to our school. It has been, just came in August. We are about full almost in each, K through 2 and 3 through 5. But a day in the life is, I mean, it's just, we have 800 students, and the students in the art program, they either are dropped off or they take the bus. They are met in the morning with sort of their pause kind of morning routine. The teacher meets them and hands them their paper, and it's their expectations for the day. They take that with them. They go into their gen ed class where they remain for majority of the day. They do, K through 2 is a group, and then 3 through 5 is a group. They do come out for social skills for about 45 minutes each day. 3 through 5 is in the middle of the day, and then K through 2 is at the end. And then at the end of the day, the last 20 or so minutes, they go into their own classroom. They come out of the gen ed and they go into the classroom with their teacher, and they sort of wrap up for the day. They check in, they go over their pause club paper, they get their pause chart. We're trying to reach 100 pause, and then we get a big party. So everybody puts their pause up, they go over kind of glows and grows throughout the day, and then students are dismissed. So, I mean, in addition, they can be pulled out for, other services like we've been talking about all night throughout the day. But they are in the gen ed class, we have the same recess, same lunch, same everything.
Their next birthday.
Integrated, right? Yeah, absolutely. So.
I'm going to add, because, I volunteered in the first couple weeks, but what was lovely is, often in these classrooms that they're pushing into, the kids with autism are not just the kids that they're seeing in the class. So they were, I've noticed the aides have slowly been working with the teachers a little bit on maybe some considerations and additional accommodations they could try and see if it would help with students out that are not just on their caseload. So there really is more of a collaborative effort with this ARP program on the school site, and your assistant principal has been working a lot with that too. So it's been lovely to see that program on that school site, because I like helping out there.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. The teachers, just like Kristen said, they work with all the students, and they are working directly with the teachers, and that's new for many of our teachers, is having all of these adults, in their rooms, and but the support is just phenomenal, and we have such a strong SPED team, RSP included. So, thank you.
All right. Okay.
I do have a question
yeah.
way back. So you have this program now at the 2 Willow Glens, but then boop, Pioneer.
Yeah.
And Willow Glen Middle is right next door to Willow Glen High School.
Yeah.
So is the plan eventually to move the high school program so they're,
That is the plan eventually.
Okay.
There's some considerations, but yes, that would be
I understand.
the ideal situation. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so another one of our unique programs that exists in the preschool through 5 space is our San Jose Unified Autism Center, which is modeled on the Morgan Center model. So brief history, a long time ago, we had an expert help do a study with us to see what are the types of students that we might need to develop a unique program for, like what are the students that we're not able to serve at our sites, what are the needs of different students that we need to meet. And they came to the recommendation that we should develop a program that's similar to the Morgan Center program, which is a high number of adults to students working in one-on-one for short periods of time throughout the day and rotating through stations. So we have that. As you can see, the student to staff ratio is quite high in this program. We have that at Terrell for our preschool programs, and then we have it at Canoas Elementary for our K through 5 programs. And we have the principal of Terrell here, Michelle Rigito, who I think that program's been there a while, so I'm just gonna ask you to say a few words about the program.
Yes, and I've been there for a long time. So it's like you said, it's a preschool, it's autism specific. It's a full day preschool, which is something that's rare that we offer. So the students are there from 9 to 2. It is a one-to-one program, and those students rotate through 10 stations. And then they also do group settings in the morning and the afternoon. And then we incorporate GLAD, which is some social skills and incorporating play during that time. And then they also have opportunities for mainstream. So because we have them for 2 years, we see a range of growth. So if we have an opportunity for them to work with our TK students, because we have TK on site as well as our kinder students, we do that. We also have speech and OT embedded into the program, so that's offered as well. And then there's toileting for everyone.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, so it's a fantastic program, and Michelle's leadership is a big part of the preschool one being successful. One more unique one before we jump into just elementary, middle, and high school is our therapeutic special day class program. Yeah.
Can we go back?
Yeah.
So my understanding of the Morgan program is not so much the ratio, but also part of the program is the focus on working out the behavioral issues with students first, and then so that they can then access their academics. But I'm hearing that tide has changed, that the focus is now more on the academic and not so much on the behavioral, and as a result, more behavioral issues are starting to crop up. So, I mean, is that conversation been coming back to you on any level?
No, have you seen that at all, Michelle?
No, because we still have access to Alan. They're on our site all the time, working with us around behavior.
No, and I've been out of that program quite a bit this year, and I actually would say my experience has been the
I was hearing
complete
this more
opposite.
at Canoas.
Yeah, at Canoas, no, I've been out there a lot this year, and I haven't experienced that at all. In fact, I think the focus has been more heavily on academics because of more development of the staff and their skills in responding to students' behaviors.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna add too, because from Terrell, our students go to different locations because with a transitional IEP, it depends on their need.
Right.
So they're not just going to
Yeah,
Canoas,
right,
they go.
right.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Okay.
So our therapeutic special day class program is for our students who may have more significant emotional needs. And so this program looks a little different at the elementary, middle, and high school, but a common theme is that there is a counseling component embedded, so there's a full-time counselor attached to the class who works with the students individually and in group on their social emotional goals. So at the middle school and high school level, these students are mainstreamed for most of the day, with that additional social emotional support being provided. At the elementary school, it really depends on the student and the different needs that they have.
Are those the only programs at Leland?
No,
Oh, okay.
no, not the only programs at Leland, Lincoln, or
Okay.
Castellano. Yeah. All right.
Yeah. How full are these programs?
I don't know off the top of my head. Yeah, sorry.
I'll email you and find out, right?
So if they're mainstreamed most of the day, what is the component that's the special day class? Help me understand kind of what it looks like.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a good question because it is actually, especially at the middle school and high school level, a lot more akin to a resource program. So it might just be nomenclature that we use, but it depends too on the student's IEP, how much specialized academic instruction that they have in a particular day. And so it really depends. I think it's a special day class because there is a classroom, and in the elementary school, some of the students spend the majority of their day in there depending on their needs. But yeah, and some in the secondary level, and even for some of the elementary students, it may look more like the Autism Resource Program, except focused on a different kind of social emotional need.
So, I mean, when I see therapeutics SDC, I think of our high anxiety students that this might be a good fit. Am I wrong in?
So it's primarily for students whose primary disability is emotional disturbance, and that's where their needs are. So anxiety, it really depends. It really depends on what else is going on with the student.
Okay.
Yeah. And whether or not, getting back to least restrictive environment, whether or not pull-out counseling is sufficient to meet their needs, or modifications and support within the general education setting is more appropriate. It really depends, yeah. Okay, so just really quickly, and honestly, the notes are gonna be better for you to have in terms of, these are just the schools in the K through 5 space with the programs at each location. And so we talked about the abbreviations, non-categorical autism and moderate severe. So these are the sites that have the different programs, if you're curious. Just because we're running short on time, I'm gonna go to there. And also we have the principal from Bret Harte, who I thought it'd be good to highlight just the SDC autism program that, they have multiple programs on their site, but I thought the SDC autism program might be a good one to highlight. You can just maybe talk a little bit about that, Alana.
Sure. So the number of SAI or specialized academic instruction classes that our students in the autism program receive every day varies student to student. So some of them only have about 2 or 3 classes in that setting, and the rest mainstreamed, same brunch, same lunch. You can see them socializing in the quad before school every day. And then some of our students have up to 5 periods of specialized academic instruction and perhaps might be mainstream just for PE or an elective. We were excited to add an additional second caseload of autism for this current school year, so over the summer, which means that our students, even those who have a lot of SAI classes in their schedule, get the opportunity now to transition between 2 SAI classes. And each of our teachers focuses on 2 academic areas and then their social cognition class. So I feel that's a really great support in terms of, preparing our students to progress throughout, the continuum of services and continue to build those skills. So that's been great. Regardless of how many SAI classes they have within their schedule, everyone starts their day in their case manager's classroom for social cognition. So they do a whole range of activities from how are we going to live out our PBIS values today, at Bret Harte, their honesty, responsibility, and respect. Or over the last week, we've really noticed that we've been struggling with positive peer interactions or a good amount of reciprocation in social exchanges. So we're going to really target that to work towards our incentive system. So yeah. If you want an honest answer, go to the autism classrooms because they will tell you what's what. Yeah,
Great.
They're great classrooms.
Thank you. Yeah.
So I'm wondering, do you see it sounds great, and I'm wondering if you all are seeing better, I'm not going to be politically correct, but if you feel like over the past 4 years with learning more and knowing more and kind of improving upon what you thought worked and maybe didn't, do you feel like you're seeing higher quality or tighter programs that are helping kids stay on track and make more progress than maybe some of the older parents who have kids who are now, is that, do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like right now, it was 92% of kids in special education were not college career ready. And we all know kids in high school who aren't doing so well, and some are. But I'm just wondering if you think that that's going to improve based on some of the quality of these programs that we're hearing. And I'm not trying to be
No. I mean, it's
negative.
a good question. It's hard to answer, I think, just because the results, I think, will lag. I mean, I'd like to say that I think the work we've done over the past 4 years is going to lead to better outcomes, but I do recognize too that they might not be immediate. I think the ability to attract and retain talented teachers is going to be central, no matter how much work we do as a district in terms of like the infrastructure and the policies and procedures. That's going to be really key. And so a lot of the stuff that might seem unrelated to special education, like the housing initiative we have and other things, is going to be really central to maintaining the quality that we want and getting the outcomes that we want. But I do think that we have gotten, with our school board focusing on special education, we've gotten more movement in the right direction than maybe we otherwise would have. Yeah.
So are there markers, like are there less kids who are being placed in non-public schools? Are there fewer behavior issues? Are there fewer kids going from, say, the ARP program down to a more restrictive environment? Yeah. Are you seeing less of that sort of movement, more upward, more mainstream general ed movement? Like, I mean,
we've seen, so I can tell you, there's like a lot of different metrics you could look at. We have seen a reduction in the disproportionality that we have. So it used to be, so disproportionality is basically like the overrepresentation of a particular ethnic group in a particular category of disability, like as to what your general population would otherwise indicate statistically. So we used to have, I think, 6 or 7 categories. We're down to 1, which is, I think, every district in the state of California is in that, has disproportionality in that area. So that's like one good way to measure, meaning that students are in less restrictive environments as a whole, because if they weren't, we would be getting dinged in those areas. That's the best metric we have. I think I would love to find like a better way. Our IEP system doesn't like have anything that really shows us that well. So we've done like one-time analyses to see is the number that moved from RSP to SDC in secondary, for example, increasing or decreasing. But we don't have like a great running indicator that we can use to measure that. So I think the disproportionality one's probably the best, because it also gets into that for preschool students too, the least restrictive environment. And we've really improved our like score in that, or our rating in that. Yeah. It's a great question. It's a really tough one to answer, I think, like holistically across the district. Like the number of students in non-public schools really could be, like the number is so small in comparison to our general population. A few students in very unique circumstances could really swing like the number.
So it seems like a lot of these programs move from school to school, and that would be pretty disruptive for the students and the staff. So how do you take that into consideration when you're saying, let's say we have this program at this middle school, but next year it's going to be at that middle school?
Yeah, it's a good question too. So we made a decent amount of moves this past school year to really try to align, to do 2 things. To try to align strands K through 12, so students who did stay in those programs could stay in the same like geographic area, and also to try to create communities of practice for our teachers so that they weren't like stranded as the only teacher. That's like Alana was talking about with Bret Harte, adding a second autism program there. So the goal is that we're not moving programs frequently at all. We'd like to keep them set, but we did realize last year that we needed to realign to better, for those 2 goals. Yeah. And we did a big analysis of like homeschool to what program students were in, and it yielded no like correlation that would help us place them so less students were traveling from their home school. Yeah.
Do you have any plans, and I hope this doesn't feel confrontational, do you have any plans for evaluating quality of these inclusion placements? So we're hearing a lot of talk about students are spending X amount of time in the gen ed classroom. And I know you just said we don't have a great measure, but is there something the district's working on to actually evaluate the quality of that placement for both the side of the student with a disability and from the perspective of either the gen ed teacher or the gen ed students in that class? Because part of inclusion is that students without disabilities are more accepting towards students with disabilities, and a good indicator of how well we're doing with that is if we have positive attitudes towards individuals with disabilities after having a class with gen ed students, or with students with disabilities as a gen ed student, or if I come out of that and I have negative attitudes. And that's great, that's an outside secondary measure of something else, but is the district doing anything to and I know there's a lot on the plate.
Yeah, yeah.
To get at that, to target that, to make sure it's not just time in a gen ed classroom, but it's actually quality.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the quality would be like, so there, I mean, there's like measures of the student's achievement in that class as well as that general education teacher's involvement in the IEP. I don't think like systemically we have anything that really monitors that. It's interesting you talk about like the experience of the general education teacher and the other students, because I referenced we're writing this early education grant, and we're actually writing in things about that. So I think as we progress as a school district and evolve, I think we'll be thinking a lot about that. Yeah, to measure that. Yeah. And the last one, because we're out of time.
So not about evaluating,
Yeah.
which is important, but one of the ways to help with the integration and the acceptance of our kids, our school is making sure that there's a special ed and a gen ed parent on each committee.
Yeah.
And if that could be done district-wide,
Yeah.
there's collaboration that then leads to better success for all.
Yeah, that's true, And I know I've gone out to a couple schools that have new programs and given talks to the parent groups. Our program specialists have done that as well, to the broader school community to prepare them, yeah.
Do you mention
it's
there's a
schools like
community advisory committee for special
I
education?
do,
Oh,
I do.
You take our brochures with you.
I did, but maybe I can't in the future.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay, yes, so we are out of time.
Oh, well, we were curious all the way along,
Yes,
right?
I know.
Yeah, so
Wait, the last
no
slide,
question about the high school.
Oh, yeah, so high school, just really quick, I'll just leave it up there while you wrap up, Kristen, if you're gonna wrap up.
No, I was just gonna
Oh,
say
okay.
thank you. Please,
Yeah.
thank you. No, this has been probably the most thorough rundown of program locations we've had in years, so I really appreciate it. I'm looking,
Principals.
and having the principals here to talk about the programs, they're really
Very,
nice,
very
so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. All
All
right.
right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, and with that,
You can leave the papers
what do
on
I
the
say?
table, we'll clean them up.
7:58, we adjourn. Thank you.
Also, if you wanna grab some food, take it.
You don't want to read it.
I guess there are some vegetables. You know my vegan diet.
Yeah.
Limits me.